upon some important things of service-related ministry within the church, ultimately for spreading your gospel and glorifying your name. We thank you for this church and the people in it and the way that they work out their Christian walk among us. We ask this all in Christ's name. Amen. I have to apologize a little bit. Every time I see the grandkids, I get sick. And I went for over 3 years avoiding COVID, seeing thousands of patients. And then they took me out about 5 weeks ago. I got COVID, but I know it was from one of them. I just don't know which one. Yeah. And then I saw them last weekend when I wasn't here, and now I'm just hacking and coughing, but trying to work through this. So I'm hoping that we'll be okay. But anyway, I don't normally sound this way. I'm fairly soft-spoken, so I have to have a lot of volume on the speaker. Joy tells me that continually. But here's the subject. So the title of what we're talking about is why bother? I'm going to have to turn this just a little bit. So why bother? And if the PowerPoint messes up, somebody just wave their hands, okay? Because I can't see what's going on up here, but I can see it from down here. But a problem arose, and we've been thinking about this for quite a while. About, a couple or 3 years ago, the thought was, our deacon body is rather slim. The church is changing and evolving and growing, and we need to add to the deacon body. But then it came to a little bit of a crisis several months ago when Chris Brown and Nancy decided to relocate. And so typically we have a deacon body of about 3 individuals, and it's been that way for many years, and I'll kind of go through that in some more detail. But it came up. I'm the chairman of the deacons. I don't really necessarily want to be chairman of the deacons, but I think it should be something more rotational and not like a lifelong sentence. But that's the way it is. And so, yes, I am looking to change that over at some point. And so your deacon body is rather quiet, and I think that's kind of good and maybe not good, but kind of quiet. But the problem came up. We need to replenish and reinvigorate the deacon body. And so with Chris leaving, it came to a head, and so that we met as pastors and deacons and said, yes, we need to do this. We went to the last business meeting last month, presented that to church, and so church says, okay, go ahead. Go get some more deacons, and we'll down that path with you. We endorse this, and that's an important thing. But then cascades. One problem leads to another, and so the other problem then falls to me as chairman of the deacons. We are now going to have to convince men in the church to consider becoming a deacon. Now, that is no easy task. And so Kendall's solution is not necessarily my solution to this thing. It says, okay, you can talk about this while I'm gone. Thank you, Kendall. Okay. So there's something in the Bible that talks about order within the church. I am to be subordinate to my pastor. And so, okay, Kendall, okay, we'll do this. Okay. Well, this was Kendall's idea. Okay. So then my thought was, well, how am I going to get these men to want to become deacons? Well, typically, when you try to make someone do something, you can use guilt, you can coerce them, you can entice them. It's the old carrot stick thing. And so I was like, well, none of that's going to work. I said, well, it's not my job anyway. It's really the Lord's calling for these men within the church and the organization of the body. But it caused me to think a great deal about my own deaconhood and my own past. And so I kind of went back, and we all like stories, but this is a story that kind of influenced me a great deal back in the day. And back in the day was about 25 years ago. So we had just moved to Burlington from St. Louis, and I was establishing a practice in dermatology. Underserved area, there's no other dermatologist in an 80-mile radius around, and probably we service about 250,000 people amongst all those little towns everywhere. And so it's just an overwhelming task, and it always has been. And I was a fool to come here because it was just too much work for one individual, and it's been that way for many years. And by fool, I use that word loosely because I think it was a God-given calling, but it was a little bit like Nineveh and Jonah. There we go. Okay. I'm still kicking and screaming every now and then. I don't show it. I do it privately in my own time, but I'm still kicking and screaming. Lord, why am I here? You guys have those times, I'm sure, but you don't show it. So we go back to 1998. I've been here in Burlington for a couple of years, and I'm at the Iowa Dermatologic Society meeting, and I'm a 36-year-old dermatologist from Southeast Iowa, and I'm trying to break in to a fairly close-knit group of dermatologists across the state. Most dermatologists in the state of Iowa are trained at the University of Iowa. I was not. I was trained at Washington University, and people kind of beat their chest over where they come from and their lineage as far as their training goes and how good they are at what they do. But anyway, I'm trying to gently break into this crowd. And the invited speaker for this particular event has invited a new approach to wrinkles. And he really has just broken open this approach to wrinkles, and he has gained a worldwide reputation. He had a pre-existing relationship with one of the faculty at the University of Iowa, so they invited this distinguished speaker to come to our society meeting. The meeting was essentially kind of below him, given his international, worldwide prominence. And so he's there at the meeting, okay, and he gives his description of what his discovery was. And this is the discovery, okay. This squiggly thing up here is a molecule called botulinum toxin. And it's called a miracle toxin. It's produced by Clostridium botulinum. And it's a toxin because it blocks nerve signals between muscles as the nerves try to ask the muscles to contract. And it gives rise to a lethal condition, botulism. And so when I was in medical school back in the 80s, I was taught that you are to fear botulism. If you ever diagnose it, the chances are your patient's not going to survive because you will diagnose it too late, and it's hard to detect early, and the patient just dies. And so it comes from old food and rotted material, and it's out there in the environment, and we just don't see it very often because we're careful about it. We don't have vaccines against it, and so it was ingrained in people of my generation is that you fear and absolutely stay away from botulinum toxin. So they're one of the most toxic things known to man. And his premise was that you inject small amounts of this into people's face and they look better. And we were like, you do what? Botox. And so anyway, we get through the meeting, and he's about 6 to 8 years into his discovery. It was actually used by a few other people in the world before him, but he was the first to formulate a series of patients and publish it and present it at a national meeting. And this is what he's known for. This is not him. This is an older picture, but we used to wear ties, and we wear gloves, and we inject this stuff into people's face, and they look better. They look better. I have not known in my entire career anyone who has not liked Botox after it's been injected into their face. And so, and I don't have permission from Allergan to talk about their product, but anyway, it's a pretty phenomenal product. But the problem came in is during dinner, okay? For some really strange reason, I can't remember why, I am accidentally seated next to this invited speaker. And so it's this big table, and you hate these dinners because it's loud. The only person you can really communicate to is the one to your left and the one to your right. And I'm the one to his right, my left, because I remember that specifically, and he has one other person to talk to. And so this distinguished speaker has two options, either me or the other person. So he chooses to speak to me first, me being a young guy. I don't really push the conversation very much, but eventually it gets around to what I do and where I'm at and where I'm going in my career and all that stuff. And I said, well, I live in Southeast Iowa, came here 2 years ago. I'm working really hard. I'm trying to establish all this, and I'm working with people who've never had any concept of what dermatology is, both physicians and patients, and it's just overwhelming. I was just exasperated, and I wanted this distinguished speaker who had an international reputation and practiced all over the world, was at the height of his career, to give me a few hints on how to cope. And this is what he said. He said, why bother? And I was completely deflated. You mean what you're telling me is that I should just give up, close the practice, relocate, go back into academia, and then forge my life from there? Yep, that's what he was saying. Do you know this, Joy? You don't know this. And so when I come home from these meetings, Joy usually says, well, how was the meeting? And I usually say, then what, so I never shared this with her. But this has haunted me for 25 years. Well, why bother? Why bother? And so then you dig deeper. And so then I think, well, how can I ask anybody to be a deacon unless I can answer the question, why bother? Okay? Because being a deacon requires a little bit of self-sacrifice, a little bit of taking it on the chin, and a lot of dealing with problems you don't want to deal with. And so it caused me to go back and do a little reflecting. I started asking Joyce all these questions about past members of the church, things that we had done before over the years. And I think she got tired of me, and she dug this out. I don't know where she got it. And she basically threw it at me and gave it to me and said, leave me alone. I've got other things to do. And so I started paging through it and looking through it. This is 2007, so this is 16 years ago. Okay, this is the church as it existed 16 years ago. Okay, and I looked and I thought, oh, that person's dead. That one's gone. That one moved away. That one died. Oh, that was a bad deal. It's just, but there's a few gems in here. Ruth Ho, Kendall references her all the time. Dana Utt's parents are here. Just some wonderful people. But if you ask, who in this audience right now are in this book? Only 5 people. The Weisners, and Glenn Alleman, wherever he is. I saw him this morning. And Joy and I. And that's it. Everybody else has been replaced or died. And so you find that funny. Well, but it's true. It's a little unsettling when you've been here the whole time and the entire church has either died or turned over. And so where have we been? Well, this is where we've been. Where is it going? Well, that's what we're hoping to answer a little bit today as we recruit these deacons into this. Okay. So this is what Kendall used to look like when he was a normal person, okay? Amen, yeah, okay. This was our pastor for a long time. The beard, I think, came pre-pandemic, is about 6 years ago. Is about right, maybe? It's about 6 years later. I don't know what it was. But anyway, I got some shaking heads. And so, yeah, we used to have a normal pastor. But anyway, my wife was a prototypical song leader for many, many years. And Joy, can you tell me why you're holding up 3 fingers?
That would have been, we're going to sing verse 3 of whatever hymn.
Thank you, Joy. Okay. This is song leader sign language. In the day, we sang from a hymn. This thing that's propping up the iPad now that has lost its function as a hymn. You have verses, and you sing a verse, and you do the chorus, and you go back and sing another verse. Well, you're supposed to change verses on the second and third and fourth. And you're usually asleep, not paying attention. And so by the time you get the chorus, you don't know what verse you're on anymore. And so the song director gives you sign language. And so you can just look at the hymn the entire time, but when the new verse starts, you got to glance up, look at the choir director, and go back down, okay? So if and when we ever get back to hymns, that's how it's done, okay? We'll have to call Joy out of retirement. Yeah, there she goes. But that's sign language, but that's Joy. All right. Joy has not changed, has she? No. Joy, no. I was going to say, and I'm going to take heat on this, but it's 25 years of sunscreen, Retin-A, and Botox. It makes a difference. Okay, I'm sorry. I may not be here next weekend. Okay. Okay, so let's reflect some more. Okay. So here's your prior deacons. Well, not yours because you weren't here 16 years ago. Okay. When I first came to the church 28 years ago? I can't remember. Anyway, long time ago. We had Bob, Dwayne, Joe, and Craig, the 4 of them. And these dates are approximate. For the 1990s to 2005. Then Craig and Joe actually move away. Joe went first. Dwayne became ill. Joe moved away, and then we had Bob, Craig, and me. That's when I started working as a deacon, 2005, about 2015. And then Craig and Bob, Craig moved away, and Bob got very sick and eventually died. And so then it was me, Ken, and Chris. Ken's not here today, I don't think. And then Chris has now moved away. Here's the past deacons. These three older fellows were just a joy to be around. They were so fun just to watch, especially when they argued. I couldn't wait to just sit in the wings and watch them fight. And they were involved in these building projects, and they just fight it out over this and that, often just ridiculous. There was 2 pine trees on the church property that was sitting right over there somewhere. And there was an element in the church that wanted to call this Twin Pines Baptist Church. And Joe was vehemently against it. And so he just came one day and just cut him down. He just asked permission. So I think he did that. And so somebody did, but they were just gone. And so, I mean, stuff like that. So no, we did not become Twin Pines Baptist Church. So look at the back of this picture. Look at those trees. And you go back and you look at them now. 20 years, 25 years, that's what happens. They grow up. Anyway, Dwayne's gone. The Bob's gone. There's a memorial tree for Bob out there near the parking lot. And Joe is still alive up in Bittendorf. Over here is Craig. And he's the most gentlest person, one of the most gentlest person I've ever met. And, I've met a lot of people because I'm old. And so he's up in Des Moines area. His wife, Cheryl, is about as gentle as he is. And so they're just blessed people. So these reflections of the church directory, you start getting fatigued. I think if I boiled it down, what is going on in my thought process of this reflections is the 3 things. One is there was a lot of work in these 16 years plus, a lot of work. And so work, most of us don't like work. We try to stay away from work, but work is good. Work is God ordained, provided that you're involved in the appropriate projects. But there's overwhelming blessings, just blessings that I can't, are too numerous to mention. And then the last thing that really kind of hits hard is that there's been change. Lots and lots of change, and we have to work through that. Okay, well, what kind of change are we talking about? Well, this was the Adams family in 2007. 16 years of time has consequences, okay? Those consequences involve not just the beard, but you've got in-laws and you've got grandbabies, okay? Grandbabies, and so consequences. This picture was lifted off of Facebook without permission. 2 days ago, I don't have Facebook. I screamed out to Joy, I need a picture of the Adams family, all the grandkids, go get one. Because I don't have a Facebook account. And it says, I got the perfect one for you. This thing is only 2 days old, I think. So anyway, that's what they're doing. So how many grandkids are there? I got to thinking about this a little bit, yeah. So we got, and I can't, this is Charlie, and this is Lucy? Ruthie, they sound the same. Okay, I don't know the rest of them. I lost track. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the baby bump, 7. Oh, yeah. Everybody say, okay. All right, yeah. What about this family? Okay. Yeah, and so 16 years change, okay? So this guy and this girl are not the same, even though Joy looks the same for the reasons I said earlier. But all these people here are not the same, and count the babies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so we and the Adams family are in hot competition. Heated competition. And so now I had forgotten about Courtney, and so now I gotta go talk to Chantal. I got to talk to Katie, and I got to talk to Ellen. I said, we need one more. Joy tells me I'm not supposed to do that. And then I got to get this girl on eharmony.com and get that going. And so, yeah, this is called patriarchal micromanagement, and it's something you're supposed to not engage in, okay? Get you in trouble, okay? Get you in trouble. What other changes happened? Well, guess what? Day before yesterday, the World Health Organization announced that the COVID-19 emergency is over. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All of the restrictions are relaxing. Okay. And that's always good. It came down to, we're not going to talk about why we're at the point we're at now, but it's been a long journey. It's been difficult. But everything has changed. And so in our head, we want to say it's over. It's not over because things are different. And we live in a different world. And so this comes across in certain surveys. And I'm kind of attuned to what is this world going to do? Because I'm finding that in my work, which has always been a bit overwhelming, it's gotten even worse, a lot worse. And I'm trying to figure out why. Part of it is post-pandemic surge in health consumption because people didn't do things for a little while and they all want to come in. We're getting people that I haven't seen in 10 years. Well, why did you come in today? Well, I just thought it was time. Well, what about 5 years ago? No, now is the time. There's something different about the psyche that's going on. The other thing that I sense is that there's more volatility in people. I can never know when a staff member is going to explode, have a breakdown, or a patient will, okay? And then it just makes it more difficult to navigate healthcare in this world. This is a survey put out really collected in early March of this year, and it's looking at happiness among the general population. So they survey over 1,000 people, well, actually about 2,500 people, and over the past 50 plus years, since early 1970s, people have been in this category pretty happy. About 55% of the people are in that category. And that did not change and has not changed. They didn't do as much surveying during the pandemic, but that category has not changed. But what is really interesting is the category of the very happy plummeted from 30 to 35% down to around 10%. And so in any given time, in any given venue, say in this room, if we have 80 people, there's only about 8 of you that are really happy, if this is true, okay? Only about 8 of you, okay? About, 60 of you are pretty happy, whatever. You've always been not really indifferent. But the other sad thing about the circumstances we find ourselves in is this category of not too happy. And that went from just over 10% up to about 30%. And so that means 24 of you are not happy at all. Okay? And we're so good at hiding that, is that we have no idea of who's unhappy and who's not. And thank you. I get carried away. So we don't know who of you are unhappy. And when I see my 50 patients tomorrow, how many of those people? And the least little thing will flip a switch and they will start crying or they will just bite my head off. And one thing that does preserve it, Jeff and I were talking about it, is many of these patients have established relationships that sort of buffers it a little bit, so they're not going to bite my head off if I've been their friend for 25 years. But it's just a difficult environment. But this is what it is right now. And if you ask these people who are very happy, the 10% that are very happy, what makes them very happy, okay? And if you are in that category of just sort of okay or unhappy, pay attention, because this is how you dig yourself out if you're not going to rely on God himself to help you. Are 3 categories. 1, relationships matter. Marriage helps you be very happy most of the time, sometimes not, but most of the time. Community involvement is a big one, but a huge one that the survey didn't dwell on was a belief in God. A religious system is critical to remaining happy. So what about church attendance? And I've really wondered about this, and as deacons, we've been wondering, what is this going to do to church attendance? And everybody thought, it's going to plummet, we're going to lose half our church. But if you look at the attendance numbers for this particular church, our church went down a little bit, but not much. And it's been the same throughout the pandemic. But boy, has it changed. I mean, I wish I knew more of you better, but we're all a little bit, some of us are newcomers to one another. Some I've known for a long time, some not so much. So the bottom line is that there has been a contraction of church attendance. It's pulled back by about 8% of people have stopped coming to church. But what's very interesting is 4% of people have started coming to church. Okay, the pandemic shook them up enough, saying they need God, or they need people, or something, and they came back to church, or they came to church. And so, how this 4% play out is going to be very interesting. What that 8% does, whether they're going to come back or what they're going to do, who knows? But those are the numbers. And so, the numbers go up and down as far as attending religious services in person have recovered to November of 2022. The online viewing has gone down because it went to online for quite a while, has gone down, but overall church attendance has kind of plateaued or stabilized. But I don't know what the future holds for this church with regard to post-pandemic changes in our population. And then some very other interesting things are happening, okay? Have you heard about the Ashbury revival? Okay? Yeah, this is kind of interesting, really interesting. And so it occurred in Ashbury, started on February 8th, 2023, a chapel service at a small Christian college in Ashbury, called Ashbury in Kentucky. And they had a typical chapel service. And the chapel service went on. It went late. And then it kept going and going and going, and it degraded into, that's a terrible way to put it, degraded into a prayer service, okay? Yeah, who wants to go to prayer service? But the prayer service did not end. It went around the clock, 24 hours a day, for 2 weeks. Thousands of people came, and you see the auditorium full. And it dumbfounded Ashbury, it dumbfounded the Christian community, it dumbfounded the sort of secular environment, and this is a website from higher education. It's not a Christian website. And people are trying to figure out what happened and what are going to be the consequences of it. And so it lasted for 2 full weeks. And so some very interesting things were happening. So note bene, it's Latin for observe carefully and take special notice, okay? If we try to pull you in as a deacon, and I'm kind of, this is a warning, replenishing and invigorating deacon body would take place in a more complex and unpredictable environment. Okay, but it's going to be very interesting, more so than it probably has been in the last 40 years. Okay, you can expect more irrational behavior and more volatile behavior, and more bizarre things are probably going to happen, just because people are torn up and they're hiding it. But the hope for revival that has not been seen in decades is there, okay? And hopefully we'll be part of it, hopefully. The one thing that is constant and steady, though, is Jesus. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Hebrews 13:8, we have to rely on that promise. And so our conclusion is that, where do we go from here? Well, part of thinking about the deacons is talk about what do they do. And these are the scripture that focuses on deacons and what they do. I have 2 books. This book by Benjamin Merkel, published in 2008. This book by Matt Smethurst in 2021 goes in extraordinary detail. And so we're going to talk about the role of deacons, and I'm going to probably pick up the pace here because I'm storytelling too much. Okay, Acts 6, 1-7. In those days, when the number of disciples were increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. And so this was the early church. It was exploding in numbers. The problem was classic discrimination, them versus us. We got the Hellenistic Jews, which were more Greek-like, and then we got the Hebraic Jews, which were more native to Jerusalem. And they got a problem because there's discrimination. And so the solution, the apostles came up with this idea. So the 12 gathered all of the disciples together and said, it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them and we'll give our attention to prayer and ministry of the word. So the problem is seen as extremely serious. It could tear apart the early church. That form of discrimination, and they gathered all of the disciples. And I hadn't really thought about this, but there were 8,000 disciples by then. Okay, you gather, that's a mega church. I mean, a mega church, all gathered together to solve this problem, and they have to propose a solution. And the deacons are tasked with supporting the work of the pastors, the early apostles, the elders, by caring for the outward or physical concerns of the church life. And so that is what the first deacons do. Now here comes consequences. And so verse 5, this proposal pleased the whole group, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith, and we know him to be the first martyr, of the Holy Spirit, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch, who was a convert from Judaism. They presented these men to the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them, form of ordination. So the word of God spread, and the number of the disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and the large number of priests became obedient to the faith. And so the only two offices in the early church that called for ordination by the congregation were for elders or pastors, and the other was for the deacons. And so it was a special office, a new office that would endure forever. Okay? Note, all of the deacons had Greek names. And so those apostles, in their wisdom, and those 8,000 disciples solved the problem by picking all Hellenistic Jews to take care of the Hellenistic widows and to prove that they were doing it fairly. And so all of these guys listed over on the right are Hellenistic Greek believers. Everybody's got a halo except Nicholas. And it took me about 20 minutes of internet researching to figure out why he doesn't have a halo. But that's another story for another time. So the conclusions. A deacon model is established. Okay, a deacon model is established. One, ministry is prioritized. And so the apostles are not going to wait on tables. They are not going to be deaconing tables, but we will devote ourselves to prayer and to deaconing of the word. They are going to serve up the word and not be all distracted by doing all this other stuff. The whole congregation is involved. Okay? Character is mandated in a deacon. The deaconal candidate must be of good repute, full of spirit, and full of wisdom. Labor is divided. Unity is prioritized, and then the deacons become the shock absorbers, which is true. I mean, the deacons solve problems way before it gets to the church, and there's a lot of fires that get put out, and that's important for unity. The deacons become problem solvers. They really have to have a knack for it. They have to be on guard for it. They have to be thinking about it, thinking through ideas and options. They have to have a knack for solving problems. And taking the church through the pandemic was quite unique. There were no books on that. There were no published literature on that. And I can tell you maybe we did some things wrong. I think we did a lot of things right. And the same struggle went with other churches. So it becomes a very quiet work, but it has a profound effect. It really does. So what about deacon qualifications? What makes you eligible to be a deacon? I can tell you right now, it's not age, it's not experience, it's not your skill set. It's really your character, okay? 1 Timothy 3, 8 through 13, in the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must be first tested. And then if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. In the same way, women are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. A deacon must be faithful to his wife and must manage his children and his household as well. Those who have served well will gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. Okay, so Paul does not dwell on what a deacon is capable of, nor is his skill set, but rather his character. You know, I have 3 daughters, and I thought, you know, it's going to be really great because they're probably going to attract males, and that'll be okay. I expect that. But, you know, I was thinking, well, maybe we could get a mechanic, maybe we could get a lawyer, a really good accountant. Yeah, you know, we got a computer programmer, and we got an IT guy, and it's just like, I'm still waiting on that skill set. I only have 1 daughter left, and she works with a bunch of bankers. I mean, well, you know. But those guys that we have so far, they're really good. I wouldn't trade them for the world. Yeah, they're really, and that's evil of me to think in those terms. But that's what it is. So the church is not after a skill set. The church is after a character, okay? Yeah, and a passion and a concern for the church and a willingness to serve. So diaconal qualities focus on 3 negatives, 3 positives, but it all comes down to dignity and being worthy of respect. So the 3 negatives really focus on self-control and not double-tongued. Deacons hear a lot of stuff that's not common knowledge, and you are not to spread that, okay? Basically, you got to be really careful and sensitive about other people. Not addicted to much wine. Any addiction of any type can distract from your purpose and what you're doing, and not greedy for dishonest gain, obsession over money, and worldly materialism. The 3 positives is that you hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. And so you must know some basic biblical doctrine, okay? The mystery is the divine truth that was once hidden is now revealed. You got to know the faith, hold the faith, live the faith. You must be tested and proven. And so church has a right to vet your history if you want to be a deaconal candidate. You know, who are you? You know, are you able to kind of endure under certain pressure? Do you have a dignified a certain amount of integrity about you? A faithful family life. And so how you treat your family is really a testing ground to loving others. Raising children in gentle firmness, joyful love. Establishing a belief system and morals within the home. So those are kind of qualifications. And then you get a payback. This is your deacon pay, okay? This is what you get if you endure and serve as a good deacon. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing. The excellent standing really comes from the church itself, and people will treat you nicely. And then great assurance, a faith from God. And so God smiles on the deacon who's doing a good job. And so that's your reward. So summary, the deacon priorities. 1, spot and meet tangible needs. Okay, pretty obvious. Protect and promote church unity. Okay, that's important, critical. Serve and support the ministry of the elders. And so in our church, as in many churches, but not all churches, deacons are not authority figures. Deacons are encouragers, they're troubleshooters, they're problem solvers, but they do not have oversight over the congregation. They do not have oversight over the elders. And this is a biblical strategy. So we have Jesus as the head of the church. We have the elders who are synonymous with preachers or pastors, ministers. They have oversight and teaching as their primary objectives, as we saw early in the book of Acts. And then we have deacons kind of sitting in the wings, constantly working on service and administration to make their efforts more fruitful, directed to the church, but also to the outside world. Okay, and so elders lead in ministry, deacons facilitate that ministry, and then the congregation does the ministry. And so that's how the jobs are broken up. And so I think this is Kendall's dream. The board of elders would be a mixture of multiple pastors who would have inherent gifts that would focus on maybe worship service or discipleship or youth ministry or missions. And then you've got the board of deacons that has expertise in finance or administration or benevolence or human resources or church camp or whatever. But the division of labor becomes pretty clear. So another thing that's important for everybody to understand as we move toward trying to find deacon candidates would be that we operate as a congregational church. And so what does that mean? Well, congregational church means that we are very local and democratic, as most Baptists are and several other denominations. The final authority does not reside with pastors or deacons, and that might be found shocking to you, okay? But rather, it's the local assembly of believers, and that's why the business meetings are so important. And so the nemesis of many pastors in a congregational church is that they can be voted out in usually about 2 business meetings and thrown out. And sometimes that's the right thing to do, and a lot of times it's not. But anyway, a lot of authority exists within the voting members of the congregation. In fact, that's most of the authority within the church. Decisions are made by the majority of vote. And so I'm going to kind of guilt you now. Okay, if you're a member of this church and you don't come to business meeting, you probably should, because that's where important things are, okay, happening. So they often form loose denominational associations, and so we do that. We have a cooperative ministry that goes on. The most common structure is the head pastor. He sets the vision for the church, performs preaching and teaching, although you may have other pastoral staff or elders. The plurality of elders involves the use of multiple elders within the church with the distinct responsibilities and often have equal authority. And of course, Jesus himself is the head of the body and the chief shepherd. So now, the elephant in the room, okay. Can women be deacons or deaconesses? And we could spend the next 4 hours on this if you want. But I'm going to this is called a sidestep, okay? I'm going to sidestep it. Each of the books that I have spend about 15 pages on the subject, and it is a point of controversy, okay? This church does not have women deacons or elders, and don't want to argue about it. And yes, there's arguments on both sides, and sometime maybe in private I'll kind of share my thoughts in private about what it is, but we don't. We're a very traditional Baptist church. So how do we select our deacons? Here's our selection process. This is in our Constitution, and it basically comes down to kind of a winnowing process. Basically, you have all of the eligible men in the church, which are male and members of the church, and been a member for a year. Okay. Now, of course, if you take that group, which is on this sheet of paper, 19 individuals. Okay, that's your group of men to pick from. Okay. Then you take that group, and it actually, the way the Constitution is written, you go to the church, and I know you can't read this, but I tried to spell it out here in a diagram. You go to the church and you say, which of these men do you favor as being considered, not elected, but being considered as deaconal candidates? And then that list gets narrowed down. Okay, and then once that list is narrowed down, the list then goes to the pastor and current deacons, who then sort of works through that list, has interviews with those candidates, and then the list is narrowed down further because there's things that are done in private that say, this is just not going to work, and that list is winnowed further, and so the church gives approval for a bigger group, and that gets winnowed down by the pastor and deacons to a final group, and then that final group is then brought to the church for final approval. And once approved, then you move toward ordination. So the first step, which will be happening in the next week or two, is that we will attempt to contact every single man who's been in the church for more than a year that's a member, say, do you want to serve as a deacon? And if the answer is, nope, there's no way I will ever want to be a deacon, that's okay. That's all right. I'm going to tell you, your ministry should exist elsewhere then, because it doesn't mean that you should be doing nothing, okay? All right, that's fine. Or if you say, yes, I do. I'm gung-ho. This is great. Please consider me. Check. Okay, you're in the group. Or you're going to say, I'm not sure. Could you answer some questions? Then we have questions, and we talk about it, and we answer questions, and then you make a decision. You say, yeah, I think I want to proceed. Or you say, maybe next time. Okay, that's okay too. But we got to get the list down, and then when the list is down, then we bring it to the church to say, church members, do you want us to interview these people further to look into the deacon process? And the answer is yes or no. Now, every step of the way is a sensitive point of the possibility that someone's going to say, or something's going to arise that says, no, you should not be a deacon. And that's where, risk for fallout occurs. But we have to be mature enough to work through that process to kind of go through that in detail. So are you called to be a deacon? It's a self-giving service for the good of Christ's church and the glory of his name. There's a few things that fly in the face of becoming a deacon. One is living the dream, which we'll talk about a little bit, and passivity or disengagement. Remember that it's your character that counts and not your skills. You will always feel inadequate. I feel inadequate as being a deacon. I can tell you I'm a terrible introvert. Welcoming time, I don't like. Do I think it's a good thing for the church to greet each other? Yes, I do. But introverts don't like it. Okay, you got to talk to people. And Jeff, when you come up to me and you say, how's it going? That bothers me, okay? Because if I really shared with you what I want to share, I don't share with anybody. Because, so I'm teasing, but I'm kind of not. or I have to lie to you, and I don't want. That's one of the 10 Commandments, and so so that interaction is hard for me, and I feel inadequate because I can't know each of you because I don't have capacity to know each of you and do what I want to for each of you. I am pulled apart at work by staff and patients, and now those 7 grandkids who run up to you with their snotty faces, grab you by the leg, and then wipe their nose. And I'm probably going to be more frequently ill than I ever. And so you will feel inadequate. So that's just the way it's going to be. Okay. So living the dream. This is a falsity, and we were talking about that this morning. Is that Jeff's clients now have personalized, egotistical approaches to getting their cars fixed. Before it was need-based and helping others, that sort of thing. But now it's all about me. It's all about me. And so this is a linguistic study, and over the past 20 years, this phrase, living the dream, has just taken off in popularity. And that is that we're taught in society that no matter how old you are or what stage you are in life, you are to expect to be living the dream. Okay. And that's why when people get ill or sick, they become so angry because it's not part of living the dream. And when I tell them it's a chronic illness and there's no cure, but there's things that we can do, they get really mad. Okay, they get really mad. So living dream flies in the face. The other thing is deacon development is really a journey, and there's a great deal of passivity. But what I mean by passivity is that in today's world, it's extraordinarily active to disengage and not care about things around you. And there's a problem amongst men, and me being one of them, that I worry a lot about. When Ben brought home this girl named Chantal, I'll never forget the day. As she climbed out of the vehicle with Ben, Ben was introducing her. We were on the, you remember Joy. We were on the driveway, and Chantal, being timid, Joy and my 3 daughters circled her, and it was like hyenas around the prey. And they were firing questions. And Chantal was by herself, and Ben and I were way out on the periphery, and I was like, you guys were acting so weird. I said, what was that all about? And my daughter said, Dad, you don't understand. Ben is precious. He's a good guy. Guys in his generation, all they do is go to the basement and play video games. They don't have any purpose. They don't care. They're not concerned. But Ben's a good guy, and by golly, we're not going to let anybody just have him. And so Chantal had to work through that. And that just fascinated me. It was like this vehemence that was uncalled for. I was kind of like, I got to go get this girl out of here before there's nothing left of her. And so, come on, Chantal, let's go inside. I'll show you the house. And anyway, it worked out. Now they have kids and RSV and strep and COVID. And okay. So, passivity. Passivity is the intent, and I don't have time to go through this, but the idea is that it's easier to kind of stay back, just do your job, not have a lot of focus in life, and just let the lady run the shop, which is okay. Joy and I have done what we've done because we've been able to divide and conquer, and that's an admirable way to, I think, pursue life. But when you divide and conquer and you walk off as a man and give up your God-given responsibilities to lead, the woman has no choice but to step up and lead, okay? And that's a problem, and so we have to work on that as a deacon body. This talks about passivity and more. The couple last things here, we are all called to be deacons. One is trust in Jesus. If you trust in Jesus, then you by default are a diakonos, okay? It's used 29 times in the Bible, and so you don't have to be a deacon to serve. In fact, everyone serves as they're Christian, okay? These scriptures use the word diakonos, or deacon, and they've been rewritten. The greatest among you shall be your deacon, okay? Jesus said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and deacon of all. If anyone deacons me, he must follow me. Where I am, there will my deacon be also. If anyone deacons me, the Father will honor him. So Jesus, as the suffering servant, came not to be deaconed, but to deacon himself, to give his life as a ransom for many. And so go this week and deacon some people and see what happens, okay? So, in conclusion, why bother? This verse runs in my head as much as those verses, that interaction, why bother, so many years ago. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. And so that's my goal for myself, and I hope it becomes your goal. I want you to note that this word servant here is actually the Greek word dole, which means slave, which is a different connotation. Becoming a dole is actually part of the journey, and that's a deeper next sermon or message, okay? But this one's about deacon, being a deacon. So I'm going to close in prayer. We'll have, I'll close in prayer after our last song, and I'll kind of stick around to answer whatever questions you might have if you're, otherwise, if you're on this list, be expected to be called in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.